Right, good evening everyone and welcome to this meeting of Cheltenham Borough Council's Licensing Subcommittee for Alcohol and Gambling, which is being held today on Wednesday the 11th of October 2023. My name is Councillor Dr David Willingham and I have been elected to chair of the committee. Meeting is being streamed live to YouTube and being recorded for training purposes. If there are any breaks in transmission to the YouTube stream, the meeting will be adjourned for a short period until any technical issues are resolved. The meeting will be retained on the Council's YouTube channel for 4 years. Please note there is CCTV in the Council chamber as well. Other housekeeping items, a fire alarm is not planned for this evening, but if it does sound, then please leave via the nearest exits, which are marked with the green signs behind you where you came in and also there. Finally, if you have a mobile phone or anything else that is beeps or rings or then could disturb the meeting, could you please put them on silent? So with that, as item 1, I am elected as chair. Item 2 is apologies. There are 3 of us, so there are none. Item 3 is declarations of interest, and I am not seeing any from my colleagues. So item 4 is the determination of a review, an application for a premises licence review. So I will just go through the process. Because this is a regulatory item, members must be present and have heard the proceedings in their entirety to vote on this item. We will ensure that the licensee, the licensee's representative and the officer from the Home Office, Immigration Officer are present. I will ask the licensing officer to introduce the report. Members will get the opportunity to ask the licensing officer any questions as a result of that, as will the licensee or their representative and the Home Office Immigration Officer. I will then ask the Home Office Immigration Officer to speak and to make the case for the review. And then there will be opportunity for members to ask any questions. We'll then ask the applicant or their representative to speak, and again, they'll get the same amount of time to make their case, and again, there will be an opportunity for questions from members. There is no cross-examination, this isn't a court. We may then go back round that and hear from the Home Office Immigration Officer again, and then the licensee again. Members will debate the matter and the applicant will be given the final right of reply. We may then adjourn to go through the writing of the decision notice, and then we will come back and provide the decision. Yep.
There's also been some late papers by the licensee. Catherine's gone off to print them off, so once they're done,
Okay.
you will have to adjourn
Right.
in between them.
Okay, so I've just been advised that there are some papers that have been provided slightly late. So we will probably adjourn just so that everyone has an opportunity to read through them.
Do you want to give those to Vicky first? Sorry. Give them to Vicky first so she can check them before they give them to members.
It's a Home Office report that was missing. That is the first thing that's been circulated.
Yeah.
The second thing that's been circulated is something from the licensee's house solicitor.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 separate bits.
Okay.
So I don't know if
So-
you want to adjourn once Catherine comes back
Okay.
with those printed before
Thank you.
we go through Jason's report.
So yeah, just to explain, there was there seems to be an extra piece of paper that was not on our website due to an IT issue. So what I propose that we will do is we'll wait for the paperwork to appear. We will adjourn so that everybody has the opportunity to avail themselves of that information. And then we'll come back. So what do we think? Probably 10 minutes. So restart hopefully at 20 past, if that's reasonable.
Catherine hasn't come back yet with them. There's 9 sheets.
There were 9.
Yeah, we can read this one and read the other one. Yeah.
Okay, so
So if I put 25
well,
past,
25 past, so we'll give it a quarter of an hour. So for those watching on the webcast, this is just a technical, there have been some extra papers submitted, and we need to give everybody in the room the opportunity to read them and avail themselves of what details are in those papers. So we'll adjourn until hopefully 25 past. Okay, for members of the public watching, welcome back. There was a slight delay whilst we had quite a lot of documents photocopied. I will just check with the Home Office licensing, immigration officer, and also the licensee. Are you happy that you've all had a chance to read everything? Yep. Okay, so I ran through the process just before we adjourned. So I would like to restart that process, which hopefully everyone got that and can still recall. So if I can ask the licensing officer to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. We're here this evening for a subcommittee under the Licensing Act 2003 for a review application for the premises known as Koloshi Bar and Restaurant. This application for review was brought by the Home Office's Immigration Enforcement Unit, and copies of the application are attached at Appendix 1, and a copy of the licence for the premises is attached at Appendix 2. The licensing hearing is to consider this application and decide what steps, if necessary, are required to promote the licensing objectives. The review of the premises licence was submitted on the 11th of August. Members are to note that the application for a transfer of the premises licence was received on 25th of August and processed very, very quickly, as is the way with a transfer application. Members should understand the effect of that transfer application in light of the application for a premises licence review, i.e. the premises licence review came in for incidents earlier in the year, and this licence was transferred in August of this year. What I would suggest, though, is obviously from the evidence we've just been shown, there was a lease was actually taken out for the premises, or the sublease, I should say. That was dealt with, by the look of it, on the 10th of April 2023. So there does seem to have been a delay from that business potentially changing hands. The applicant can explain this, but there seems to be a delay between the business changing hands and the transfer application coming to us. But that's obviously something for the applicant to clarify. The review application goes out for 28 days for consultation. We've had no further comments from any of the responsible authorities or from other persons or businesses in the vicinity of the premises. The Licensing Act has 4 licensing objectives as laid out in the report under 5.6A to D, and most people will be familiar with those, but please look at them if you're not. In determining a licensing application, including a review, the overriding principle adopted by the authority will be that each application is determined on its merits. When we look at the Licensing Act, we have the legislation itself, we have various regulations, we have the statutory guidance, I should say, which the council must have regard to, and we also have our own council policy, which the council must have regard to. As it details at 6.2 of the report, the prevention of crime includes the prevention of immigration crime, including the prevention of illegal working in licensed premises. Licensing authorities should work with the Home Office Immigration Unit as well as the police. Licence conditions that are considered appropriate for the prevention of illegal working in licensed premises might include a premises licence holder to undertake right-to-work checks on all staff, etc. And that's obviously something that members will be aware of, that there is the ability to actually attach those types of conditions. And there's some guidance on that, 6.2. The proceedings in a review are a key protection for the community where problems associated with the licensing objectives occur. The licensing authority may decide that the review does not require it to take any further steps, but obviously it may decide to amend or modify the conditions, exclude a licensable activity, which aren't particularly relevant in this instance. However, it can remove a designated premises supervisor, it can suspend the licence for up to 3 months, and it can revoke the licence. It should be remembered that if a revocation or suspension is applied, that decision does not take effect until 21 days after the decision has been given in writing. In deciding which other powers to invoke, it is expected that licensing authorities should, so far as possible, seek to establish the cause or causes of the concerns that the representations identify. If remedial action is to be taken, obviously falling short of a revocation, the remedial action should generally be directed at those causes and should be always no more than appropriate and proportionate. The licensing authority's duty is to take steps with a view to promotion of the licensing objectives, as I've said, in terms of the interests of the wider community. Obviously, we've got this transfer application in the mix, and it's for members to decide to what extent that is relevant or otherwise. And finally, members must determine the application for this review on its merits and based upon the information available to the committee. At the time of the writing the report, officers had not been able to establish whether civil penalties had been imposed and whether these had been paid or appealed. But that's obviously something the Home Office might be able to clarify. However, the statutory guidance points out there is no reason why representations giving rise to a review of a premises need to be delayed pending the outcome of that sort of action. It's therefore the committee's discretion therefore to proceed with a determination of review pending the outcome of any of those criminal proceedings. So that's quite clear. And that is my report, unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions for our licensing officer? I am not seeing any questions. So does the Home Office Immigration Officer, do you have any questions for the officer based on the report? And then the licensee, do you have any questions based on that? Okay. So if I can now ask the Home Office Immigration Officer to address the committee, please.
Good evening. I am Immigration Officer Jackson, warrant number 20894, and I'm here today representing the Home Office. I work for Cardiff Immigration Compliance and Enforcement Arrest Team. Part of our role is to conduct intelligence-led operations in response to information that we receive in order to investigate allegations of businesses believed to be employing illegal workers. On Saturday, the 1st of April 2023, I was officer in charge of an intelligence-led enforcement visit to Koloshi Indian Restaurant in Cheltenham. The Home Office had received an allegation that there were 3 named males being employed illegally and living in accommodation above the address. The team entered the premises at approximately 18:55 hours by warrant issued by Cardiff and Vale Magistration Court for the 3 named males. Excuse me. Officers encountered 12 workers in total, 1 who arrived partway through the enforcement visit and was the son of the owner. 2 of the males named on the warrant were encountered illegally working at the premises, along with a further 4 males who gave an adverse reaction to our presence. All 6, half of those that present on the night, were found to be illegally present in the UK and did not have permission to work. They were subsequently arrested and escorted to police custody. All individuals admitted to working and confirmed they were provided with accommodation along with payment for their services. In addition, a male who I now know to be Mr. Muhammad Azad Hussain, who identified himself as the owner or the manager at the time, was also questioned regarding the employment of the illegal workers. Statements from the officers have been provided. Mr. Hussain fully admitted that all individuals were working at the premises and he provided accommodation and payment to all 6 of the illegal workers. A civil penalty notice was issued to Mr. Hussain on the evening, stating that a penalty of up to £120,000 would be considered. Following the visit, a referral was made to the civil penalty compliance team in relation to the illegal working. On the 4th of August 2023, a civil penalty of £90,000 was issued to Koloshi Gold Limited for the employment of 6 individuals with no right to work in the United Kingdom. The business had until the 4th of September 2023 to appeal the decision. Koloshi Gold Limited have made no appeal in relation to the civil penalty. Therefore, we can assume accepting liability. Due to this, I'm here today to suggest the committee consider revocation of the premises alcohol licence. The premises licence holder in any licensed premises has a statutory obligation to promote the licensing objectives and to ensure that, as the designated premises supervisor, they are conducting the day-to-day operations in line with these expectations. This is not the case in this instance. The premises has failed to meet the licensing objective of the prevention of crime and disorder, as they were employing 6 persons illegally at the time of the visit, all of which had overstayed their leave in the UK. When questioned, the owner stated that he had not conducted the necessary right-to-work checks to determine that the subjects were allowed to work in the UK, however stated that he had records for those who had a right to work in the UK, thus showing a complete disregard to UK legislation. The ability to work illegally is a key driver of illegal migration. It encourages people to break the UK's immigration laws and provides practical means for migrants to remain unlawfully in the UK. It also encourages people to take risks in trying to enter the UK illegally and leaves them vulnerable to exploitative employers. The employment of people who do not have the right to work in the UK is a serious crime and can be linked to the exploitation of vulnerable people. Illegal working has a huge negative impact on the UK, which has a harmful social and economic effect on legitimate businesses who are employing persons illegally. It also negatively impacts on the wages of lawful workers and can be linked to other labour market abuse such as tax evasion, breach of national minimum wage and exploitive working conditions. The Home Office is committed to working with partner agencies to tackle the economic motivation behind illegal migration and those people who facilitate it by creating a hostile environment for these kind of employers. Employers may prevent a liability for civil penalty by undertaking simple right-to-work checks on all those they intend to employ and repeating the checks if an employee has a time-limited in the UK. By Mr Hussein's own admission, he has demonstrated that he is aware of such checks and has not only conducted these checks, but has records of these checks for the remainder of the staff who had a right to work. The Home Office Immigration Enforcement has presented this evidence to inform the Licensing Committee's consideration and to draw to its attention to the significant risk that the licensing objective for preventing crime and disorder is being undermined. It is requested that the Licensing Committee consider the premises licence and take the action that it considers necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you want to just hit the microphone button so that we can... if you're okay with any questions, if members have got questions. Any questions? I'm not seeing any yet. Okay, you go first. This is for the immigration officer, yeah.
Quick question, probably a really easy one to answer as well. There's a lot of information redacted on the report. Conscious that was obviously done for obvious reasons. We've just been delivered this piece of information here, which is the full payment submission with names on it. We can't fully understand at the moment if these names here are obviously the same ones on your evidence. Is there any way that we can find that out, or if that makes sense? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Is it this one here? Yeah. I would say it's unlikely that these are the people who have been paid for illegally working, given that they're on this piece of paper. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a really obvious question, but that's why I just wanted to type. Yeah.
Licensing officer.
Yeah, just a quick question on that. I mean, I can have a quick check because I've got a copy of the redacted ones anyway, so I can have a quick cross-reference. Just a quick question. I was looking at cross-referencing some of the paperwork. The company name that was prosecuted and had the penalty, what was the name of the company again? Kaloshi Gold Limited. Lovely, thank you.
Can you... so I've just got one question for you. On our page 42, so page 42 in our agenda pack, it's got the details of the designated premises supervisor as a, I need to zoom in, sorry, Najmul Islam, who was the DPS at the time, and it says in our agenda pack that the DPS hasn't changed between the with the change of the licensee. Do you know whether that person was present at the premises and were they spoken to at the time as part of your visit?
As I assume that they were legally working, I don't believe that they certainly weren't spoken to by myself on that evening.
Okay, thank you. Right, any further questions from Councillor Seacombe?
Thank you. Are you suggesting, therefore, that since your visit, there's been a change of staff?
On the evening of the visit, there were persons who were legally working. So the people that we encountered that were illegally present in the UK gave us an adverse reaction. We entered on a warrant searching for 3 people, but we had numerous reactions to our presence which indicated that there may be an immigration offence, and we therefore questioned to establish their status in the UK, and we established from there that they were illegally present. So there were other persons working that evening. Not everyone was encountered because we wouldn't have a reason to, but I wouldn't be able to say for certain if they were also legally working, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think my question is whether they've since left the business. This was April, whether they're still there.
Sorry, just to clarify, the persons who are illegally working?
Yes.
I would be very doubtful that they work in there now.
One would assume that they are going through the legal process that the Home Office has for dealing with those types of people. I guess that's not really material to our considerations. Any further questions? In which case, we now move on to Mr. Udin, who is the legal representative for the licensee. So if you would like to address the committee, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Have I got it on? Sorry. Thank you. Yes, everything the Home Office presenting officer has said in relation to the raid, if I could put it in that way, and the finding of illegal workers there, we can't comment on that. The reason being is that my client became the owner subsequent to that. Didn't know about this raid until my client had obviously learned from the council about the review. But if it assists, everything that's been said and the consequences of the illegal working, we don't take any issue with that. And we're not here in any way to justify, because we are not related to that previous owner. As the licence officer has said, there has been a change of hand, and it is a bona fide change of hand, and my client, Mr. Rahman, in a moment will address you in relation to his change. But he is a person who has had a number of businesses over the years and currently runs one business in the West Midlands in Rowley Regis, and we've got his premises license here, and is also a personal license holder, and he has had no issues whatsoever in his numerous years, I think it's over 25 years, of any illegal working, because he takes those matters very, very seriously, because he knows and appreciates the damage it does not only to the country but also to the people who are illegal, and he's never ever had that issue. The question for the committee, in essence, is this: whether, in the light of the fact that a transfer has taken place to a new owner, whether you are satisfied that is a bona fide transfer, and if it is, you are still entitled to consider, well, notwithstanding the fact that there's a transfer, rather than revoke, should we impose any conditions? And I'll come to that in a moment. But in my respectful submission, if you are satisfied there is a transfer, and therefore you have new owners, then whether the objections stand, because it would be very difficult if the current owners who were subject to this investigation or raid, if I put it in that way, to come in and justify anything that's been said by the Home Office presenting officer. So really, in essence, your considerations are A, whether it is a bona fide transfer, and B, whether the person presented before you is suitable with or without conditions to carry on with this license. If this license is revoked, then essentially that is not a viable business. That's the end of that business, because that business relies on that. The options between a revocation and continuing the license, in my result submission, you have substantial armory at your disposal in order to ensure that there isn't a repetition of this by any subsequent owners. For example, you now have a marker on this particular business that there's been subject to a raid, but also there are conditions that you can attach of keeping a record and submitting that record. You could go as far as yearly submissions to the licensing office as to whether or not they want that bureaucracy, but that will show the sincerity of the new owner, in effect. And so, for those reasons, I would submit, rather than, in a way, put this business out of business, for want of a better expression, is to consider those. But having said that, our primary submission is that you have before you an owner who has never had an issue with the immigration. He's run business and currently runs a business, and I've got the certificate here. We could show how old that is. He'll also, at the moment, he's not the designated premises supervisor there, but he'll also take over as a DPS at the business. So he, in essence, he'll have two responsibilities. He, as the DPS, is responsible for the day-to-day serving of alcohol or the maintaining in accordance with the licensing laws as the DPS. And secondly, as the director of the company that is running this business, he also has a responsibility in that regard. So therefore, in my submission, and we have supplied the documents. Now you will see from the documents, those are post-dating the raid. Now, my client will tell you, and I tell you on his instructions, that he didn't know anything about this. So obviously, this owner knew about this, didn't disclose this, but my client is interested in the Indian restaurant business. He was looking for a business, and so he went into this business. Now he's faced with this, whereby the business is in danger of losing its license, and therefore it will be a not viable business. So those are my submissions at this moment in time. He's happy to answer any questions that you ask of him. So I'm wondering whether it's better, rather than for him to make a statement, is for him to try and answer any specific questions you have, and then he could try and assist you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from members? So I think I'm just trying to understand, can you, you or your client give us a sort of timeline of the purchase process? So obviously the Home Office mentions a company called Kaloshi Gold UK Limited, and we've got a business rates invoice for 3 Gold Leisure Limited. And I just wondered if you or your client could just go through the timeline of how that sale from one to other and how that transfer process was progressed for us, please.
I think it might be better coming from you. Okay. Well, I'll try and answer the question, but I've told him to correct me if I've got any information wrong. As I understand it, the previous company that ran the business had, after the raid, had stopped trading and transferred the business to 3 Gold Leisure Limited or so, and then my client bought that company, i.e. that business, with this company. So that company, in essence, was running this business. So that company approached my client to sell the business. And so my client, I'm instructed, then bought the business of that company, not knowing about the background, and then the application for the transfer was made in August, as the licensing officer has said. I think that came in and then got transferred. But to answer to your question, that the 3 Gold Leisure Limited was already running the business when my client bought the business. But I understand 3 Gold Leisure Limited took over from the previous owners who were the subject of the raid. And they took over in April 2023.
Sorry, say that one again.
They took over in April 2023.
So one of the points from looking at the Kaloshi website, and obviously the business seems to still be branded as such, was the award-winning chef. Is that chef still part of the business?
No, the website hasn't been updated. My client hasn't gone to the technicalities of updating everything. Obviously, it's been dealing with that. But no, the answer to that question is I'm instructed is that chef's not there. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. Just going off the Home Office's report, the employer is down as Azad Hussain. Do you know, or does your client know, if there's any relation between that gentleman and Mr. Babel Hussain? And there's also an M. Hussain on the 3 Gold Leisure payslips. And also another question is, we mentioned a chef. In the employee interviews undertaken by, well, in the raid, I guess, as you put it, some of the employees there say that Agolam Assam is the chef. There's a G Assam on the September payslip. So are these people the same? And is there a connection between the Hussains as well that signed the lease and the Hussain that was the employer before?
I'm instructed that Ghulam Azam was the chef, but he had the lease in his name. He's no longer there. The reason his name is on there, in this particular business, the lease was in one person's name, but the business was being run under a vehicle. But Ghulam Azam isn't there and wasn't the owner.
So is he the same guy on this 3 Gold Leisure payslip from September 2023? There's a G Assam there.
J. Hussein?
Z Hussein.
Z. Hussein. Sorry.
Azad A Hussein, sorry.
Okay, A. Hussein. Sorry, I apologize. My instructions are, the chef that was there was a Mr. A. Hussein,
Azad Hussein,
Azad Hussein.
yeah. The owner, he was the owner.
He was also the owner, but Mr. Azam, G. Azam,
His lease as in Tanzania.
the lease was in his name. That's why his name is on there, but he's not the chef there now.
He was the owner.
He's not the chef. I'm sorry, he's not the chef there. He wasn't in any event. He had the lease in his name.
Okay. Can you touch the mic?
Yeah, that kind of helps. I guess I'm just wondering why there's still the G Azam on the payslip when you just said that he has nothing to do with the business anymore. So that's kind of a bit odd. And also, just another question for your client: are all these Husseins, are they all related? No. It's just is it a common name? Because I have 4 of them. So
If it helps, Udin, Hussein, Mia are very common name in the community, in the Bangladeshi community. No.
forgive my ignorance, but I just thought for 4 Husseins, I thought maybe 1 or 2 of them might be related. That's all.
So I'm, in terms of, just as another question, in terms of your client's purchase, can you or take advice or ask him to explain the sort of level of due diligence he did when purchasing the company to look at this? So that's the first question. And then the second question is, given where the venue, the premises is, so it's not a restaurant in the centre of town, so there won't be a lot of footfall past there. And the fact the previous one was operating with 6 staff who were paid less than national minimum wage, not paying tax, national insurance, etc. How do the finances, how is he making those finances stack up for the business? Because obviously the previous incarnation of this was sustainable financially, with underpaid workers, and I'm just trying to work out how this one, how it is viable if the previous business wasn't paying, and obviously he has to pay his staff the going rate, the national minimum wage at least, and all of the taxes and etc. on those. So those are the 2 questions I've got at the moment.
He doesn't know how the other business operated, but although he's never ever employed illegal employees, it actually doesn't make any economical benefit to employ illegal employees, in the sense that we don't know how the other person has done it, but he has found the business viable since he's operated. And also, he has another business which can fund it, but he doesn't need to. And also, we don't exactly know whether those people who were arrested did tell the truth to the Home Office as to exactly what the salary is or what it is. Because, again, if this person was paying these people under the books, or under the table, then the chances are they would have got cash from the customers, but not declared that, but then paid that in salary. But in any event, my client's position is this business is viable. That's why he's a businessman. He knows about the business, and he is able to maintain it, definitely with legal workers and definitely with the payment of the salaries. So that's dealing with the payment of the wages. In relation to the purchase, the due diligence, now my client is not a sophisticated businessman in the sense that he knows the curry trade. Now, obviously, if you have companies buying companies, people would have due diligence, they'll consider TUP, transfer of undertakings. These kind of deals are done by word, or somebody's word is their bond, rather than have agreements. But the due diligence was this. He went in, he tells me, he saw the business, he saw the takings, obviously monitored it, how much the business was making, and what a business is worth to a formal market is one value, but to a businessman who knows how to develop the business is something. So he agreed at a price of £100,000, but that payment is due in April before the tax year ends. And the reason for that is the fact that that is their, if I say, their trade, if I could put it in this way, due diligence. So you tell me what the business does, I've seen what the business does. If it doesn't do what the business does, then I ain't going to pay you. That's the kind of agreement they have. But so far, from what he's seen for his takeover, that's why you've got that 1 year period whereby, well, look, you know, I've agreed with you, but the fact is he's totally happy with the business, and that's why he's gone through this process.
Yeah, another question. You mentioned your client visited the property and saw an opportunity there. So the officers from the Home Office visited on the 1st of April 2023. The lease looks like it's been written on the 6th of April 2023. So I'm guessing then that your client visited before the 1st of April 2023?
No, it was in April, but he didn't know anything about the raid, so it could have happened before. But as far as when I say visited, he's visited the property, looked at the taking. So normally what they would do, he tells me, is they look at the Friday, Saturday business. The Friday and Saturday business is the one that tells you how much his business will make, I'm instructed. But he wasn't aware of the raid, so he doesn't know when that exactly happened. Sorry? And before, yeah. And he's been, previously he's gone, so previously he's gone to the business, because a business, obviously, somebody will go have a meal, you know, sometimes surreptitiously will go and just to see how the business is doing. So, but he wasn't aware of any of this illegal working. Obviously, when he's been there himself, he couldn't ask to look at the records of the employees or anything like that. He just has to take their word at face value that these are all legally employed people.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. That makes more sense if he had been before that, because, yeah, he wouldn't have been able to go and see it on a Friday or Saturday before the 1st of April, because the 1st of April was a Saturday. But I think that's okay for now. Thank you.
Councillor Seacombe.
Thank you. When did your client actually start running the business? That's the first of my questions. When did you actually start running it?
His specific answer is it's either the 10th or the 12th. I can't remember which day, but it was either the 10th or the 12th of April.
Oh, can you?
Oh, sorry.
My second question is, how many employees are there at the moment, whether they're full-time or part-time? What is the total number of people employed in the business?
I'm instructed, including part-time, 10 in total. And the part-time people normally would work on a Friday and a Saturday.
Okay, so I'm just looking through the submission that you've got from Three Gold Leisure Limited. And I'm looking at the licence for undertaking particulars, which is dated the 6th of April 2023. And I've just looked on Company's House at Three Gold Leisure Limited. So Three Gold Leisure Limited appears to have had a director, Junu Begum, who was the director until the 9th of October 2023. And day before yesterday. And your client took over as a director on the 9th of October, both with correspondence addresses of Koloshi on London Road. So I'm just trying to work out in what capacity the deed was signed by your client on the 6th of April when he wasn't a director of the company according to Company's House, and who the J, Junu or J on the payslip J Begum is?
She's the same director.
Yes, same director, yeah.
I'm instructed the J Begum is the same as the J Begum as the director that was in the company.
আর ওটাতে লাগছে কি তাহলে হই আমরা কোম্পানি বেসর লাইবিলিটি চেঞ্জ করতাম জানতাম এটা করতাম that's why so
And the reason the formal transfer wasn't taking place on the directorship was because he needed to establish all the company's liabilities. Those were not forthcoming, and then they came forthcoming. But the instructions were with the accountant to change over. So once that came in, J Begum was the director, and he's now director. But in the capacity, as far as he was told, he assumed the role of a director. In effect, he was a shadow director. But he wasn't formally changed at the Company's House. Because, yes, the lawyer who obviously had executed the document must have just assumed he was a formal director in Company's House, but as far as he was concerned, he was acting as the director, a shadow director.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions from colleagues? The licensing officer's got some questions as well. Jason?
Thank you. Just a bit of a range of things here, really. What role does N Islam have in the business currently, if any?
I'm not sure whether you're going for that. He said there's no N Islam, to his knowledge.
N Islam is named on your premises licence
Sorry,
as your
do you wanna-
designated premises supervisor.
So yes, that was a question that he thought from here. N Islam, what is the premises supervisor, hasn't been moved. My client is going to be putting himself as the premises supervisor. They changed the DPS because he's the DPS currently at this property in Rowley Regis. So N Islam is a DPS.
N Islam is the DPS. Does he still work at the
Can you just...
Sorry.
Does N Islam, is he responsible for the sale of alcohol at this business?
He's not an employee, but he's responsible for, as the person that everybody has to ask, and he supervises the sale of alcohol, but he's not an employee at the moment until the reason is he's waiting for the DPS to be changed into his name before he lets N Islam go, but he's not working as an employee.
Whatever happens this evening, you need to make sure that whoever is supervising the sale of alcohol actually is doing that in reality. If not, then you cannot make a sale of alcohol, okay? That's point number one. Point number two, obviously there's some reference to Mr. I'm assuming it's a Mr. or Mrs. G. Azam, okay. Obviously, that person is named on the sublease of 10th of April 2023, and that person is referred to as the landlord or the sublessee. On the licence for underletting, the landlord is described as KBS Properties Limited, and the tenant is described as G. Azam. G. Azam is also referred to as the secretary for Kaloshi Gold GB Limited, and he was, or she was, appointed to that on the 2nd of October 2019. Now that person, it seems, still has a controlling interest in this building to some extent.
Yes. Yeah. The reason being he's the leaseholder, the head leaseholder. So yes, in that respect, from a legal respect, he is the leaseholder of the building, but it doesn't have anything to do with the business. That's the difference. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, of course. But the point is, if one looks at the documents, the sublease, you obviously could have a freeholder and you could have a head leaseholder. That's what it is. But he has no controlling or any interest in the business.
Okay, so this individual, Azam, was appointed to the business in October 2019, and at that point they were the secretary for Kaloshi Gold GB Limited. And that person on Kaloshi Gold GB Limited is still active, and that's obviously the company that the Home Office are dealing with. But that registration is still active, that business is still active, and that person obviously has that other role. You're saying there's a separation in that role, and then we have this Free Gold Leisure Limited that's the other company. Something I must have missed a point on this. You've said that you've paid an amount of cash for the business, but that cash is not going to be paid until next April. Where is the documentation that guarantees that is going to be paid by your client come April next year? Because this individual is obviously making a living from the business at the moment, could run that business to rack and ruin, and it seems I'm new to business, I don't have a clue about these things. I'm struggling to find out how you can sell a business but not actually pay for it until a year afterwards with no deposit. Is there any paperwork to back this up?
Paperwork's about
I'm instructed that paperwork isn't made because, as I said at the beginning, the way they dealt with this matter is like it's a word, their bond. Now, in relation to the payment, that is agreed between the parties. Now, one of the reasons they accepted the offer from him is because they know they could trust him and he will buy. And it could be that the people, again, you're asking the question as to how would somebody agree as a bond, like a word of mouth to £100,000 prize without any kind of legal documentation. I'm instructed that that's the way the agreement was reached. And in any event, going back to the point earlier on, the business that is being run from, or the entity that runs the business from there is the company, 3D Gold Leisure Limited. The other company may still exist. That's a matter for them in the company's house. But the business that's being run from that, and that could be checked out, and the PAYE checks that out as well, is by 3D Leisure Limited. There aren't two companies running one business from that address. So that's the answer to the other point.
Just a follow-on question from that. Have you got the funds to actually pay that amount of money? I mean, has that been guaranteed in any way to whoever? And who would that payment be made to? So in terms of buying that business, who will that payment actually be made to, as an individual or a business?
That money will be paid to Jay Begum, the lady who was the director. It was her business in essence.
Still employed by the business?
Yeah. because she was a director up until the 9th of October, she had to be kept on there because she was an employee as well. But because that was a method of guaranteeing that he's not going to run my business down to ground and then not run up. That's a quid pro quo.
Okay, just the final question. So how did your client actually find out this business was for sale? Was he phoned? Did he see an advert somewhere? What was, because obviously that situation seems to have happened very, very quickly after the immigration visit. This all seems to have happened very, very quickly. There's a commitment there, obviously, to pay for a business for £100,000, which seems to have been done very, very quickly. In the scheme of things, £100,000 is an awful lot of money to me. If I was going to shell out that sort of money, I'd be spending months before I decided to do something. This seems to happen very, very quickly. And the final point is obviously the transfer application for this has only come in August, when we're told the business changed hands in April. So there's two questions there, and then I'm done.
My client tells me he has a friend who owns a restaurant called Spice Lounge in Cheltenham, where he goes a lot. He was then told this business is up for sale. And the way Indian restaurants are sold are like that. You never see them advertised, well, rarely see them advertised, because these are how these businesses are sold, I'm instructed. And when he was told about this business, and in regards to the £100,000 price, looks a lot, but in the restaurant business, that is not a lot, I am told. And in any event, it appears to be a fire sale by the sellers. So obviously, they've got some financial difficulties, and they've agreed, because what they're, in essence, doing is getting rid of the business, because my client would be responsible for the rent, which is about £30,000 a year. So they get rid of that. They get rid of the liabilities. So they're not running a business. So the 100,000 could be for other liabilities, whatever it is. But the point is, his position is £100,000 is not a lot of money for a business. And he thought he's getting a bargain with this, and especially with the... Yeah, and in essence, he's getting an interest-free credit when he pays the money. So that was so obviously the deal has been done, and it happens when either a business is in the verge of bankruptcy, something is better than nothing. And if you've got somebody who's trustworthy, because there are other people, because in this community, a lot of the time there are community angles where it's frowned upon if somebody backs up a deal and you have other people witnessing it, and they'll say, look, I'm prepared to come to court.
That's just prompted one last question. Obviously, there's a closeness to the community there. You've mentioned the fact that another business has highlighted that this was happening. I mean, as your client, maybe he just wants to repeat this. He did not know that this review was happening for this premises until August, in spite of the fact that he's obviously linked to the community in Cheltenham and linked to other businesses. He didn't know this was happening.
Oh, can you put your microphone on? Sorry, please.
Yeah, he didn't know anything about this review until he just said, until he got the email. But these are something that obviously the people who are responsible for the, or knew about it, would try and keep it from him, or try and keep it from the community and other people. It's not something they'll shout, and even if it's published, not everybody looks at, because a lot of the people don't live in Cheltenham or in the area, so unless, if it's like, if they live in Birmingham, even then you won't get it until, you know, you see a newspaper, and you've got to get a particular newspaper to look at it. So no, he was kept, and he says, look, Adam, I was kept in the dark about this. And just going back on one point, notwithstanding the fact that he hasn't paid the money, he still has invested time and money in running the business up until now.
Councillor Seacombe.
I'm not sure you quite satisfactorily answered the question of whether you can lay your hands on £100,000 at a moment's notice to be paid in April, whether you have that money there or whether you're hoping to earn it through running the business as it is at the moment. So could you put your hands on £100,000 just like that?
I'm told he has a number of businesses, both here and abroad. He's also selling a house. He knows he'll get the money by April to pay because the money's there because he's a businessman and that's what he does. But he knows that for £100,000 this business is a bargain, and he knows once he runs it for a bit, he could, even if he wants to sell it, he'll sell it for double the money. But his position is he could get the money. Yes, he owns a house, owns businesses.
So, just going through some other questions. Does your client get to keep the Kaloshi brand as part of the business? So, obviously, the restaurant has a name for itself. Is that part of the transfer?
It is. It's I'm sorry, because whatever the business is worth, the name is worth something as well. Because if he changes the name, it's not the customers that come. He'll lose all that, and he's not going to change that. So yes, the name comes with it, if that makes sense. And therefore, if you mean the brand by the name, then they're both interrelated.
Okay, because obviously the company is called Three Gold Leisure. There was Kaloshi Gold UK Limited still exists. And that's a bit confusing. The other question I've got for you is, obviously you've got a top lease from KBS Properties Limited, signed by a Mr. Babul Hussain. Now, looking at this, looking at Company's House, for Kaloshi Gold GB Limited, which is the original company dealt with by the Home Office, Mr. Babul Hussain seems to have been a former director of Kaloshi at the same address as the premises. So I'm just wondering what's going on here. There seems to be a lot of interlinked personalities. So we've got G. Azam, Babul Hussain. These seem to be the same people popping up in lots of different places of control. And I'm just wondering if your client could explain that to us.
As you were asking the question, my client was saying, I don't know anything about all those I didn't go. All I know is I'm getting this business. I've got a license to assign. I've got a lease. And I'm running the business as nobody stopped me from running it. Now, in relation to, obviously, a person who may be a landlord or a head lessee, they have no interest in the business. All they have an interest is the building or the leasehold or the freehold, but they have no interest in the business. It's my business. I am responsible for that business. And the premises license belongs to the business, not to the lease, not to the freehold, and I am responsible to the authorities, the licensing authorities, as well as the Home Office. They're not. So I can't come here and say, well, I didn't do anything, it's them, because they are only the owners of the freehold or the head lease, but nothing to do with the business, and it's the business which is responsible for everything.
One more question, Jason.
Sorry, yeah, this is just something, I might have missed this, because obviously we've been talking a lot about the ownership of the business and whatever tonight. I can't remember in your presentation, so apologies if I missed this. Did you actually detail, if obviously this review doesn't lead to revocation of the licence and the licence is kept, did you actually detail what steps you'll be taking to make sure that this never, ever happens again, and that you are not caught out in a situation such as this? Because obviously this premises has had this happen. It may well be that if someone wants to come to Cheltenham, they might go to this place to seek out illegal work. How, if this licence was maintained, how are you actually going to, in practical steps, guarantee to the committee that this never happens again?
Initially, when I started off, I did say there are conditions that you could impose. And one of the conditions I was suggesting is a record being submitted to the licensing office as to whether or not they want to have the bureaucracy. But in addition to that, he says he's happy to have CCTV installed so that CCTV could be picked by the Home Office, anybody, and to see who are the employees running around, and then check with the employee records as to whether, because all employee records will have ID, passport ID or photographic ID in relation to that. The other thing that says, he says, look, really guarantees is because I don't want to lose my livelihood, because if anything happens here, I know it could impact on my license in Rowley Regis, where I've been running a business for 25 years. It's my livelihood. I'm not going to play with my livelihood. What's the thing? CCTV, and any other conditions that the committee may consider imposing, because for him, he's in this commitment now of this business. He's invested time. He's got to obviously pay the money, but the point is he feels that he knows at any time if there's any thing violated, this will be up for review, and this particular review would be brought up. And he's never, in his 25 years, well, the licensing didn't come in till about 15, 20 years, but in any event, even prior to when you had Justice's license, there's never been any violation, any conviction from him. So those are, and so answering your question, I hope I answered it. A, what I proposed initially, i.e. Employee checks, keeping and submitting them to the licensing committee, or keeping them on the premises for any checks, CCTVs, and anything else. And in all his restaurants, he has CCTV that he accesses on his mobile phone. So even from here, he could access and see who's coming, who's going in there, and who's selling what. Oh, sorry.
So one final, just another question from me. So your client said that he was intending to become the DPS of the premises here. Now, as a lay person, I'm thinking but he's currently a DPS elsewhere, in Birmingham, in Rowley Regis. Is it physically possible for him to be supervising both of those at the same time, or is he going to come off of the other one? And can you just explain that? Because again, that would be a concern that if he's not providing that service up there, then the supervision might be in name only.
No, he's going to be taking an active part here. His son is going to be taking over as a DPS in the Rowley Regis. That's why there's been this delay. He will be here full time to be responsible for everything, because obviously once this is also he needs to prove,
and to make this business as well,
because he needs to make this a success. And so, yeah, to answer your question, he will come off there. There'll be somebody else on that one. But ultimate responsibility for that premise relies on him. But obviously, there's the DPS, which is his son. So it's not somebody, a stranger. So he's not going to put his son at jeopardy, and he's going to be here. I don't know whether that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? Councillor Seacombe.
Just as a matter of interest, is the restaurant functioning this evening in your absence?
Yes.
But he's not the DPS at the moment, so... No.
The difficulty is this meeting was more important because that, yeah, of course, I mean, there are times when an owner has to be absent for hours, but this, I mean, obviously, as soon as this is finished, he'll be going over there.
Are there any more questions from any of the members? Licensing officer. Okay. What I will do, just so that we can have an opportunity to just go round, I'll ask our Home Office Immigration Officer if there's any comments that she'd like to make following what you've heard, and then we'll go back to you and your back to the licensee and legal rep. Is there anything you wish to add? have to give you that opportunity to respond there if you're okay.
I'm sorry if I repeat anything, but I just want to emphasize just a couple of points, if I may. Like we said at the beginning, everything the Home Office presenting officer has said, we don't contest. We can't contest, and frankly, we didn't know anything about it. But what has happened is wrong. We ask you to look at our track record about our previous, we brought the license here, we've got the original, which we'll give to you in a moment. Thirdly, in relation to the fact that there are conditions at your disposal that, like the licensing officer said, how would you ensure that if this license isn't revoked, that the licensing conditions are complied with for the safety and benefit of the community as well as the customers that you serve. And again, there are conditions, and in any event, he knows that at any point, this license can be brought back for review if there has been any misinformation given to you in this regard. And finally, in regards to the control, he's the person in control, regardless of the documents, but the main documents are the one, is the sublease. In relation to the answer, these are executed documents signed in front of solicitors, as you will see. He was advised he was able to sign the document, but in any event, the fact that he's now an official director, it validates the document in any event. Sometimes business people who are in a hurry, they get documents executed, but that does not in any way invalidate the document. But in any event, he's responsible. There's a rent that needs to be paid out, and he feels he got a bargain and he wishes to maintain this restaurant.
So I think now we'll move on to the member debate. So I'll say to members, before I open the debate, I will remind you it's important that you give due regard to the Council's licensing policy. If you deviate from that policy, you give clear reasons for doing so. It's important that you only take into account material licensing considerations and that your decisions are reasonable, proportionate and rational. I think it's important for us, if we're going to say things, that some of that is said in front of you, but when we come to making the reasons, I think we will adjourn and formulate the decision notice. So I don't know if anyone else wants to start or whether you'd like me to put my comments. We can kick off. Fine. So I think that there are two, in my mind, there are two possibilities to weigh. There is no dispute about the evidence from the Home Office, so that would engage the crime and disorder part of the Licensing Act 2003. The national guidance, the Section 182 guidance, says at 2.6 that it includes the prevention of immigration crime. This was six cases of failure to check immigration documents, and there definitely seems to be some complicity by the previous owner. There are obviously things in the report such as a description of the individual sat at a customer table pretending to be a customer. He was in full waiter uniform. He was using a spoon to eat what looked like ice water. Again, suggests an intention to deceive. There are comments in there that suggest complicity in providing illegal work for trafficked individuals. There is national minimum wage issues. If you compare the hours that were stated to be worked and the amount of money paid in cash, that doesn't come close to the national minimum wage. There's obviously no national insurance or tax paid in relation to people who are without a national insurance number, and all of those would relate to crime and disorder. And that would be, as the Home Office have said, strong grounds to revoke the licence. The other question is, the other option to my mind seems to be that your client has been a victim of failure to sort of do good due diligence in understanding well, either not doing due diligence or has been duped by people and is potentially a victim themselves. The law has the matter of caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Within that sort of side of things, the question really is whether your client is that victim, as has been said, or whether the names on the documents are names by proxy. And I guess that is for us to weigh. That's where I'm looking at as to whether there is clear evidence that your client is a bona fide owner, it's all been transferred above board, and there is no controlling influence from anyone associated with the previous company. Because if there, in my mind, if there was controlling influence from someone related to the previous company, it could appear to be by effectively management by proxy of just putting a different name on the legal documents. Though those two things seem to be the case that I'm trying to weigh up in my head, i.e., is your client that victim of failure to do, or the failure of due diligence of caveat emptor, or is your client a name put on there by proxy? Those are the things that I'm trying to weigh up, and I hope that's saying the two things without trying to cast aspersions, because those are how I'm just trying to think about it and how that would impact on the crime and disorder objectives. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to say anything further in public session. Councillor Seacombe?
I think it all boils down to the date at which our applicant this evening really took over, and in relation to the Home Office raid, as has been described earlier on. If the raid was before he took over and therefore took control, I would suggest that puts him in the clear.
Do you want to add anything? Okay, so what I was going to propose now is that I give you the final right of reply as required by law. Before I do that, I will just make sure that my legal officer is happy with what's been said so far, and the licensing officer is happy. Yep. So what I will propose is I'll give you your final right of reply, and then we will adjourn and formulate our decision notice.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 points. It's totally out of ordinary for the raid to happen after my client had taken over, because that's not the case, in the sense that if that was the case, then my client's fingerprints, if I could put it in those ways, or footprints, would have been on there. It hasn't. It clearly appears that the sellers have taken the decision to sell or put the word out and have a fire sale after the raid. But in any event, my client has a business, has a business, and he says, so that's, and the other thing, I don't think it's a long shot, but just to look at why this person would be buying a business in this location. And in a way, there's a simple answer to that. He lives and his business is in Rowley Regis. Rowley Regis is less than 3 minutes onto the M5. To get to Cheltenham, it's one straight M5 motorway to get to Cheltenham. And you're here. So it's the location. You know what people say about business, it's location, 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 or buying house, location, location, location. So for him, it's one straight road on the M5 from Rowley Regis to come here. So that's why it's convenient. That's why he was interested in this business. Because, yeah. And prior to that, he used to have businesses in Yorkshire. So he knows, and again, so obviously, but here he just wanted to be closer to him, but he knows it's going to take about an hour to get here from Rowley Regis. So those 2 points. And then I think the issue was about the raid. Well, the problem with that is we can't prove a negative, but obviously, if he was the owner or had a control before the raid, then he is practicing deception on this committee, and that is fraud. And in order to establish or determine that somebody has been fraudulent before you, the burden is quite high on the decision maker, I would submit, to come to that conclusion. So therefore, there's no way he's going to come here and lie before you about that aspect of it. Sorry.
If I bring you back in, we've got to go round that loop again, but that's fine. Okay, okay, go on, Jason.
Sorry, just in the process of that, obviously you've just made a suggestion to the committee, which I'm sure Vicky would advise anyway. As you're aware in your legal role, the burden of, you know, the consideration of these things is the balance of probability. The committee here doesn't have to believe beyond reasonable doubt that your client has tried to pull the wool over their eyes if they were to think that. They have to simply believe that on the balance of probability. So it's a completely different level of test than you've just described, okay? And it's not necessarily believing that your client's committed fraud, it's simply believing that your client has not been honest with them, if they were to take that view. So I just wanted to correct that. But the reason that I did actually want to flag this up was that something that we missed in this whole debate. We've obviously taken this assumption that the business was sold. Normally, in the course of that sort of transaction, money changes hands. From what you've said, no money has changed hands in relation to this deal. So in what goes along with that, if the committee are minded to believe that, is obviously if this licence is revoked, there isn't actually any loss to your client if he has been duped in this respect, because he's not paid any money in terms of buying the business anyway. That was just something that came to mind as we were going through that discussion. So,
just on the 2 points, I'm instructed that money may have changed hands with the seller, but he's invested already money in renovating this since he took over. So he will lose money in that regard. So it is essential for him to not to have the license. So he will still lose out financially. Not the £100,000 maybe, but the money, substantial amount of money he's already invested. The other point in regards to the burden, yeah, of course, it's on a balance of probability, but even in a civil court, when you have the tort of deceit, you still have a balance of probability, but still there's a high, it's not beyond reasonable doubt. I don't in any way say it's beyond reasonable doubt, but you still have to say, well, you know, somebody's lying to me, all this. And the other last point on this, about if these documents are fictitious in a way, then it's very easy for him to make a promissory note here and bring it before the court and say, sorry, before the committee and say, well, look, here's my contract documents that he's been candid with you and said, look, it's a verbal oral agreement based on the community, but it could have been very easily come today and said, look, here's a promissory note, or here's a contract, here's the agreement. Just like these documents are signed, it would have been very easy to get somewhere else if these were easily obtained, but they're not. There's listed signatures. But not label the point. He's coming with pay slips, pay slips. It would have been very easy for him to manufacture a document if that was it. But it's not. He says, look, whether they believe me or not, that's what will happen, and that's the way it happened. And again, in my response submission, that speaks volumes, and that shows credibility.
Thanks. Can I just confirm you're happy that you and your client, you've had your final right of reply and there's nothing else you wish to say to the committee before I adjourn? Just to confirm. Are you happy you've said everything you need?
Sorry, yes, just one regarding loss. So if the license goes, he'll have to make everybody redundant. He'll have to pay that. So that has to come out of his pocket, and the money is invested in this. So he has invested money.
Okay, thank you. I will propose that for the moment we adjourn for 15 minutes. That's okay. To deliberate and write our decision notice. Again?
It's 5-2 on the thing, yes, but
Oh,
2010.
2010 it is, yeah.
Yeah. Another 10 minutes then. Okay, so for those watching, welcome back. Apologies for the delay. We adjourned to write our decision notice, which I shall read out now, or our notes which will be expanded. So the unanimous decision of the committee is to revoke the licence. The committee has considered the Licensing Act 2003, the Section 182 guidance and the licensing objectives, and is confident that the prevention of crime and disorder objective is engaged. The committee has further considered the evidence and representations before it today. 6 workers with immigration issues suggest complicity in providing work for trafficked individuals. This raises questions around exploitation, failure to pay national insurance and tax, and national minimum wage, further grounds related to the prevention of crime and disorder objective. Given the rapid sale of the business, the principle of caveat emptor applies, and for £100,000, a lot more due diligence should have been undertaken. A considerable number of documents were accepted on the day of the hearing, making it difficult for the committee to properly assess the evidence supplied. The documents supplied seem to suggest, on balance of probability, people related to the company Kaloshi Gold are still involved with the company 3 Gold. The DPS has not been changed, and when questioned about this, there were a number of discrepancies on the answers. On balance of probability, the committee thinks the new owners and the documentation still show evidence of control by Kaloshi Gold and CBS Properties Limited. The committee is concerned that these are all interconnected with the company 3 Gold. This relates to the transfer dates and the people with controlling influence. On balance of probability, the committee is concerned that the current owner could still facilitate illegal working. The finely balanced conclusion is that not doing due diligence and the timeline and the lack of documentation and the amount of money is a concern. Committee believes that G. Assam, who was complicit in hiring as he ran the shifts, is still involved with both companies from the papers they have read this evening, still being paid as of September, and there is not enough distance between the previous business who employed the 6 illegal workers and the current business. The committee does not have confidence that the crime and disorder objective will be met. Other options available, including the conditions suggested, did not seem to provide sufficient remedy to our concerns. So the licence has been revoked. The written reasons will be supplied, and there is a right of appeal within 21 days of receipt of the decision notice to the Magistrates' Court. So with that, I will finish this agenda item. There are no other urgent items that need to be determined, and at 20:44 I close the meeting.